In about 90 days, I am going to take leave of a job that I have held for the last 22 years. I'm going to hand over the keys to the front door of the Hollywood Entertainment District to a successor, as yet unnamed. The job is still open. Where am I going to go? I'm going to take a little bit of a Sabbath, about 60 days to decompress, and in that time I'm going to go to Italy, and I'm going to spend about 30 days embedded in a community mental health center in Trieste, Italy. This is a city about 15 miles south of the Slovenian border, where I've had the opportunity to visit in the last 2 years. Why am I doing this? You know, after all the progress that we've made in our downtowns, considerable progress in Los Angeles and Hollywood, I told my board 3 months ago when I announced my departure that I could not reconcile the juxtaposition of cranes in the air symbolizing progress. You know, the Academy Awards have come back, we have Viacom and Netflix, thousands of apartments have been built, boutique hotels. You look up to the cranes, but every day on the street, what we see in Hollywood are barefoot, disheveled people suffering from mental illness wandering our sidewalks. Arguably, this is one of the most important issues for our downtowns in the future, just as much as placemaking or retail recruitment, and I intend to enter this space. So, homelessness. This kind of represents the label that is applied to what is arguably a very complicated issue in America today. I would argue that this label is too limiting because of what we know are the dimensions of what actually constitutes homelessness in America today. All the different people who are the cohorts who represent kind of under the umbrella of this label, we know that the way you enter a state of homelessness is complicated and the way you're going to leave is complicated. And, you know, for people like those adorable law students in Berkeley who would like to think that the label is this simplified, or the Washington Post reporter who wrote the article that you may have seen yesterday, when you think it's a one-size-fits-all for something this limiting, you lose the multidimensionality of arguably one of the most complicated issues, social issues in America today. So I want to encourage all of you, when you think about impacting this issue in your downtown, you're going to have to engage hearts because the minds will follow. You're going to have to be in coalition with others. You cannot do this alone. If you're not in a coalition, join it. If a coalition is struggling, lead it. If there is no coalition, form it. And finally, we need to speak truth with authority because we are players in this issue. Why? Because we manage downtowns where these people are living on our streets, and we do care, contrary to what some might assert. So, how did I get here? 22 years ago, I came to my first IDA conference. It was in New York City. It was in Times Square. I was brand new. I had no clue how to manage a bid. So, of course, I was at all those basic sessions about clean and safe, and I was transfixed by the best trash can to get and pole banners and security ambassadors, and there was no discussion about homelessness back then, as many of you may recall. And then things started to shift about 15 years ago, in Los Angeles at least. People visibly began to show up living on our streets, and our property owners, our board members, were none too happy to see this trend emerging. And they did not feel that this was a role for the bids to solve, or at least my bid to solve, but it was more something for the bid to take care of. So I did not feel that that was an appropriate response. So I started to do my due diligence, like, why is this happening? Who's in charge here? Who's going to fix this problem? And I was trying to research, what is government doing? What are the nonprofits doing? Well, an epiphany for me actually, again, came at an IDA conference in 2004 in Vancouver, where Phil Mangano, who was the homeless czar under President Bush at that time, did a big idea talk. And 3 things out of that talk I still remember to this day. He said that for too long in America, we had been managing homeless instead of ending it. He talked about the silos that nonprofit organizations and government agencies would sequester themselves in for their own self-protection, but they were not collaborating to end this problem. And he talked about the importance of metrics, that you cannot manage what you don't measure, and that we had to hold government accountable for outcomes. And I came home from that conference so excited that there was a role for the business community to play in this issue, and I began to insert myself feet first. So the first thing I had to do was to engage my heart. I started doing something that I had previously thought was very scary, which was to go and sit with homeless people in my district and to hear their stories and to find out, how did you get here? How did you get into this place? And I assert that that movement from anonymity to humanity is such a key element in moving people's hearts. I had to learn to draw my own boundaries because I felt compelled to put people up in hotel rooms or pay for an outfit for a job interview, and I realized that I could not on my own solve this issue. So we began to form a coalition in Hollywood, Hollywood Forward. We brought in all the usual players, and I know many of you have done this in your own community. And over the years, we were making progress. Resources were coming to Hollywood, people were being housed. But then in 2013, we held a little planning retreat to, how are we doing? What are our objectives? And we realized that in our complicated homeless scenario, there was a very small cohort of people who we called the super chronic, the highest hanging fruit. And these were people who suffered from severe mental illness who were left to die on our streets. So we created what was called the Hollywood Top 14 list, the top 14 most severely mentally ill, vulnerable people on our street left to die. And we poured ourselves into trying to help those individuals, one person at a time, get off the street. And through that process, the case studies that we developed, we learned a lot about how the systems fail people with severe mental illness. We began to document those stories. 3 of those people actually died. And so I kind of became a reluctant expert in this space, and I was willing to speak out about it, and I was willing to challenge the civil libertarians who would assert that it is better to let someone die with their rights on than to actually seek treatment, and sometimes involuntary treatment, to have treatment and transformation. So I was encouraged to apply for a Stanton Fellowship, which would give me a 2-year opportunity to explore anywhere in America or the world where they're doing it better and bring that idea back to Los Angeles. So I was led to a remarkable city, Trieste, in Italy, and went there for the first time the summer of 2017, and met with a psychiatrist there who toured me through their system. And in Trieste, you don't see people wandering the streets of that town. There are people not incarcerated in their jail. There are people not locked in their hospital. It is a model based on social recovery and community. When they closed their mental hospital in the late 1970s, they did something we didn't do in America. They built a community system of care to integrate people back into the community. They believe that all people have a right to have a purpose in life, to have a job, to have something to do, someone to love. And it's interesting, in Trieste, if there's a mental health crisis, the police are not the first responders. It is the psychiatrist who will come out from the community mental health clinic. What a concept, reducing trauma and caring for people. I was so depressed when I was there. I actually started crying in this interview I had with a psychiatrist, and he said, what is wrong? And I said, the chasm between how people are treated in Trieste and how people are treated in America is so wide, I can't even imagine how we're going to bring this. It's impossible. I came home from that trip, and there was an announcement of an international conference in Trieste last November, so less than a year ago. And I had money left in my travel budget because I had not gone anywhere. And so the foundation gave me permission to subsidize a delegation from Los Angeles, because again, I cannot do this alone. So I invited 12 people, the head of our county Department of Mental Health, our mental health judge, the LAPD, LA County Jail, where there are 5,000 inmates with mental illness locked in there, the sheriffs, the district attorney, NAMI, social service providers, et cetera. A delegation of us went to Trieste, and we spent a week there. And when you're there and you see how people are treated with dignity and respect and love, you cannot shake it. So our whole group, including the head of our DMH, said, now that we've seen this, we cannot come back to Los Angeles and allow the status quo to reign. So our group has continued to meet for the last year, and we're looking at applying for an innovations grant to try to do a prototype in Los Angeles, possibly in Hollywood, where we would take these guiding principles in kind of a controlled biosphere and try to show what's possible. So I want to be a part of that. I don't have a job yet. I've quit my job. I'm hoping, David, I can come back in 2 years and do another master talk to let you know about what we're doing in Los Angeles, because I think it provides hope for all of us. So I encourage you, as leaders of your downtowns, as you look at this issue, which is enormously important and complicated in our country today, find the part that moves you or that grabs your heart or is important to your district and take ownership of it. Engage the hearts and minds of those who will help you, be in coalition, and speak truth with authority, because our voice matters. Thank you.